And now it's time for another edition of What Would Jello Do? The Trumpsies have been preparing for a year, claiming they have 1,000 lawyers who are going to go all over the country challenging everybody's ballot as long as they are black, brown, young, old, or devil-worshipping Democrats or anything like that. Anything to invalidate the election. Lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. And then when it all gets soaked into a great big tangled mess, you have a Brooks Brothers suit riot like you had in South Florida, coordinated in part by Roger Stone with a lawyer named Ted Cruz and by James Baker and others to make sure Clown Prince W got to serve 2 terms he wasn't really elected to and tip the Supreme Court accordingly. They want more. A 5-3 or 5-4 majority, and the Supreme Court isn't enough. They want 6-3. Then they can really go crazy, like we haven't even seen with Citizens United or gutting the Voting Rights Act so far. And meanwhile, they will also probably give a lot more weight to some of the wilder, crazier fantasies of a rogue Attorney General, Wild Billy Barr, who got the job by writing a paper saying that all the investigations of Trump over colluding with the Russians and everything else were all illegitimate because, like Tricky Dick Nixon insisted, the president is above the law. Ever since Nixon got run out, there have been people like Dick Cheney and Karl Rove and Roger Stone and William Barr who've been so bitter about that. Their life's mission since has been to reverse course and make sure the president really is above the law. A young dick by the name of Brett Kavanaugh wrote a paper saying that the decision to make Nixon turn over his tapes that forced him to resign was wrong, even though it was ruled unanimously 9-0. And now they smell so much blood, they're talking about overturning another unanimous decision, Brown versus the Board of Education, and working backwards from there, not just to the 1950s, but maybe the 1850s, maybe even the 1650s. Oh, excuse me. Salem witch trials were in the 1690s by descendants of the Pilgrims we give thanks to on Thanksgiving. Made a mistake there. Barr really laid out just how creepy his whole agenda is in a lecture that barely got out, it wasn't supposed to like-minded, fundamentalist, extremist Catholics at the Notre Dame University Law School, which is designed to crank out more extremist Catholics. I couldn't get the text of the speech. The article wouldn't print out, except if I printed 37 pages with all the ads in large print. But I was able to click on something William Barr published in 1995 that is pretty much word for word the same thing. So now I had to get my fat suit together and everything here for properly deliver the gospel according to William Barr. Legal issues in a post-political order. This published in The Catholic Lawyer, Volume 36, Number 1, 1995. We live in an increasingly militant secular age. A growing number of historians say that we are embarking on the post-Christian era. In a way, this is the end product of the Enlightenment. On one hand, we see the growing ascendancy of secularism and moral relativism. On the other hand, the greatest threat to free government, the founders believed, was not governmental tyranny, but political licentiousness, the abandonment of Judeo-Christian moral restraint in favor of the unbridled pursuit of personal appetites. Since the 60s, there's been a steady mounting assault on traditional values. We have lived through 30 years of permissiveness, the sexual revolution, the drug culture. Each individual has his or her own tastes. We have soaring juvenile crime, widespread drug addiction, skyrocketing venereal diseases,
1.5 million abortions per year, and record psychiatric orders.
Like William Barr, maybe?
Teenage suicide has tripled in just 20 years. In a California school system several decades ago, the top 7 problems were talking out of turn like Donald Trump, chewing gum, making noise, running in the halls, cutting into line, dress code violations, and littering. By the mid-1980s, in that same school system, the top 7 problems were drug abuse, alcohol abuse, pregnancy, suicide, rape, robbery, and assault. Almost 30% of children are born out of wedlock now. Divorce is as common as marriage. Thus, the direction to disease and illegitimacy is not sexual responsibility. I can't even find mine anymore. No, it's the distribution of condoms. The reaction to drug addiction is to pass out needles. Everyone does their own thing. Suggests, in effect, that one can find salvation on the picket line and by being involved in environmental groups and by promoting condom distribution. Today, you're seeing constant chipping away at laws designed to restrain this sexual immorality, obscenity, or euthanasia. For example, laws were proposed that treat a cohabiting couple exactly as one would treat a married couple, and compel Georgetown University to treat homosexual activist groups and any other student group. In the face of such a pervasive popular culture promoting moral relativism, how can we be confident that the pendulum will swing back? Well, lest we be above the law, for one, we must re-enter the fray. Take the battlefield, enter the struggle. The key is a return to basics, to reassemble the flock. The key is Catholic education. For everybody, presumably. Goes on about how we should all use public money to fund Catholic schools and on down the line. We must be vigilant to resist efforts by the forces of secularization to drive religious viewpoints from the public square and impinge upon the free exercise of our faith. Which of course means, in his view, that basically, well, free exercise of his faith means that no one else is allowed to exercise theirs at all. Which brings us back to the Notre Dame University Law School, where he was invited to give this speech. He didn't even give it at Falwell's Liberty University or Bob Jones University. He gave it there. And until 2017, when a certain fascist president put her on an appeals court, a longtime law professor there was one Amy Coney Barrett. She went to that law school, she teaches there, or she taught there, and here's the scary part. She not only clerked for Antonin Scalia, another extreme fundamentalist Catholic, but he supposedly called her the brightest clerk he ever had. That should give you some idea of how dangerous she is and how fanatical, obsessive, and effective she will be at finally blowing up Roe v. Wade, finally blowing up Obamacare. Those are two obvious ones because she's written on it. And of course, voting rights,
gone. Even environmental rights, gone. It's too much of a property taking or something like that. Corporations can do whatever they want, and a dictatorial president of the United States can also do whatever they want, because after all, according to William Barr, you need a strong leadership from above like that in order to do the will of God and obey, the higher laws in the Constitution, natural law, or whatever he calls it and stuff. On top of that, Amy Coney Barrett also is a member, not just a fundamentalist Catholic, she is a member of a cult called People of Praise, which is mostly but not entirely Catholic. It's small, under 2,000 supposedly, mostly based in Indiana, home of Mike Pence and Amy Coney Barrett. They describe themselves as charismatic. They believe in the supernatural and prophecy and miracle healing and have been known for speaking in tongues. Each People of Praise member is connected to a leader that they call the head. In married couples, the head for the wife is the husband. For single women, the head and the heads until recently were known as, ready, handmaids. Yeah. So what are we going to do? They're trying to ram Barrett through, the most extreme, horrible judge they can possibly come up with, who will also be the youngest judge there by a goodly amount. And keep in mind that he's still a decade or two away from getting rid of Clarence Thomas, who's the oldest one now, because he was so young when Daddy Bush put him on. And Coney Barrett is the biggest middle finger to her predecessor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, since replacing Thurgood Marshall with Clarence Thomas. Yeah. So a lot of the Democratic leaders are wringing their hands. Oh, there's nothing we can do. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe there is some stuff we can do. We don't have the filibuster, but we could be slowing down every other bill, and every last thing gets more hearings and less in order to keep delaying. But Gary Oldman in the Hannibal movie, Mitch McConnell, or maybe it was Mitch McConnell in the Hannibal movie, if you get my drift. He'll find a way around that, maybe. But so, what do you do long term in a case like that? Well, if by some miracle Biden actually gets in, and by some miracle actually decides to do something a little bolder and more progressive than his entire track record in Congress suggests he will, well, not Congress, not the Constitution, decides how many justices there are in the Supreme Court. We started with 6, then there were 5, then there were 7 for a while, and we've had 9. Franklin Roosevelt tried to add 6 more for 15, and people said overreach. I think his own party even rebelled. And that's a problem, because in order to get rid of not just an extreme right-wing majority, but an extreme religious fundamentalist majority, with Kavanaugh and Barrett being the worst of the bunch, deciding what we do in our own bedroom, putting 2 judges on for a total of 11 only leaves them with a majority of 6-5. You need to add 4 and be ready on day one on who you're going to nominate for all 4 of them if you're going to do that. Puerto Rico a state, another possibility, but I'm not sure all Puerto Ricans even want that. They'd rather be independent. DC for statehood, yeah, they've wanted that for a long time. But I've also said for years that people should be more proactive in protecting things like Roe v. Wade and marriage equality and ensuring everybody can vote even. There should be a constitutional amendment guaranteeing reproductive rights for women, that they control their own bodies, not some wacky Catholic or snake-handling cults and everything controlling it instead. There should be a constitutional amendment guaranteeing marriage equality. How hard would it really be to get a constitutional amendment through to reverse Citizens United that legalized bribery and said corporations are people too, and everybody from Sheldon Adelson to the Koch brothers to everybody else has been buying all our elections ever since? And for that matter, what about a constitutional amendment finally guaranteeing that everybody, not just women, not just 18-year-olds, everybody has the right to vote. We don't have that specific language in the Constitution. I was hoping that Congress could enact term limits on federal judges. Unfortunately, you got to do that constitutionally, which is not out of the question at this point. But European courts don't even stop there. And this is something to look up to long-term in constitutional courts. They call them in a lot of European courts. Places like Germany, Spain, and Portugal, all justices have to be approved by a 2/3 majority of the Bundestag, the parliament, whatever the legislature is. Thus, the parties sit down with each other ahead of time and try to agree on a candidate they can both support and live with. And even if they get in with a 2/3 majority, as a moderate thinking person who's actually interested in the law, the justices in Europe get one term only, 9 to 12 years, depending on the country. And many places, it's the law that to change a law, a court has to rule by unanimous consent. Not all these 5-4s blowing up our lives till kingdom come. Not in France or Italy or Belgium. And even in Germany and Spain, if there's a dissent at all, it is rarely ever published. Even American Supreme Court justices spoke unanimously 90% of the time until around 1941. Brown versus the Board of Education, I said, was unanimous. But there is also another way to delay hearings on Barrett till kingdom come that the House could be doing right now. I've said it before. Impeach Trump again and again and again, till McConnell trying to ram the courts through and said, we're not going to even get our Christmas break. How can we do this to us? Well, to keep you from destroying the country any more than you already have. Not everybody wants to live like Mitch McConnell. Okay. You can impeach Trump right now easily. Corruption, bribery, tax evasion, bank fraud, still colluding with the Russians, as well as all the other stuff that wasn't even addressed when Pelosi foolishly narrowed it to Ukraine. Acting as an agent for a foreign power again and again and again, which traces back to colluding with the Russians, which traces back to tax evasion and bank fraud. Or this might be the quickest and easiest one to get out there and not have to have endless investigation debate. 200,000 plus counts of criminally negligent homicide for how badly the COVID-19 response has been handled to this day. That wacky Dr. Atlas dude that Trump plucked off of Fox News, they won't come out and say it, but they're working on herd mentality now, which could kill as many as 2 to 6 million people by the time they're done. Or how about at least impeaching them for 10 to 20,000 counts of felony kidnapping of children on the American-Mexican border? Where are they all now? Where are their parents now? And now they're even cutting women open and giving them hysterectomies against their will. That is Auschwitz stuff. That's Dr. Mengele stuff. I worry that when all is said and done in the border, we're going to find mass graves with very small skeletons in them. Aiding and abetting domestic terrorism, telling the Proud Boys to stand up. Well, that's promoting domestic terrorism right there. Illegal use of the White House for his own campaign. Pompeo illegally using Israel. Or how about a simple impeachment for a dozen or 24 counts of rape? Yeah, okay, maybe not in the White House, but who knows? There's a lot of that out there, including that picture with a woman who said she was 15 at the time. There's Prince Andrew, there's Jeffrey Epstein, and until they cropped the photo, there was Donald Trump. Why isn't that more front and center? Because they're not impeaching him on all the things they could impeach him for. Even if McConnell had a kangaroo court every single time, let Trump off the hook, you just impeach him for something else, and in the process, highlight all these crimes, one after another, that Biden is never going to be able to do if he keeps getting interrupted when he barely forms a sentence at these so-called debates.